The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello and welcome to the 2024 Asset Management Awareness Month. My name is Scott Ray and I am the Vice President of Seminars and Events for the NPMA. Happy to have you here today and to kick off AMAM for the month of March. Before we get started with today's speaker, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please go ahead and place those in the question box. We will be monitoring that throughout the presentation, and then we'll bring questions up at the end. So definitely fill that up as questions come through, and then we'll collect them, and then Peter will address those at the end of the presentation. The slide deck for today's presentation is also available in the handout section or handouts portion of GoToWebinar. So if you're interested in the slides, definitely check that out. Those are available. And then last but certainly not least, there has been a bit of confusion over the last presentation or the last session that we are offering this month on personal professional development. That presentation will be on Thursday, March 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern. So keep that on your radar. There's been some confusion versus Wednesday versus Thursday. It will be on Thursday, March 28th. And that's the presentation by Yvonne Batcher and Scott Peterson. So definitely make note of that if you have it on the Wednesday. It actually is on the Thursday. But I just wanted to touch on that because I know there's been a few questions back and forth regarding that specific date of that presentation. So with that, I will get out of the way. I'd like to welcome in Mr. Peter Collins from A2B Tracking to talk about the importance of automation for property managers. Peter, thanks for doing this. I'm happy to have you here, and I will turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks for that intro, Scott, and to Lisa for all the great organizing of this event. I love Asset Management Awareness Month. I really reflect on these, moments of professional development. It's a great time to learn, and for all the property professionals involved to set time aside and continue to hone the skill or sharpen the saw, so to speak. Really appreciate you having me today too. I just realized by checking or logging into my npma.org account that it pops up with my anniversary date and or when I first became a member, and I'm realizing that I just became a member or I've now become a member for 20 years. So where's the in shock emoji when you need it? But all that is to say is I can't stress enough the importance of this association. And it's a great dedicated group of professionals that continue to advance their skill set in their education and elevating, in my opinion, elevating their value to the organizations that they serve. So my session today is focused on the importance of automation in property managers. So in past sessions, you would have heard me talk about the imperative for modern government property management systems. Today's session, we're going to focus more on the automation portion of that and how that plays a role in these kind of systems. Now, my name is Peter Collins, as Scott introduced. I'm the founder and CEO of A2B Tracking. So I know a thing or two about government property systems. We build, install secure cloud-based government property management systems. So what I'm here to tell you is what we're seeing in the industry today. There is, without question, a growing importance for a complete system with expectations that have changed about what you're being asked as property professionals to manage. We are all being asked in today's day and age to move faster and to move with fewer errors and with oftentimes less or fewer people. The only way to accomplish this today is by taking advantage of technology, and as you'll see here today, automation. So let me run you through the agenda quickly. This first kind of half of this session, I moved through pretty quickly. So I'll apologize early on if I'm going too fast for you, if you want to ask a question along the way, but this is a little bit more of the background stuff here, so I keep the pace. But we'll start by the session. We'll start at this session by reviewing the motivations behind the accuracy and the efficient record keeping. So what we call the ongoing impact of FIRE, FIAR, in the need for the federal government, in particular the military, to be sustainable in its audit readiness. We'll talk about what the federal government and the DoD in particular need and why. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. It's good data. It's your data. And it's making sure that your data is accurate and it's with high integrity. We'll also address how DCMA is refocusing its efforts on the need for improved results from its audits. And if anybody's been tuning into DCMA news these days, you can see some of the updates that they take in what they're achieving as well, even within the past week or so. But also, it sheds light on the important role of the PMSA, which I'm sure many of you know. We'll discuss the update on government systems and how that reporting of the key data is crucial, and your interdependence of those key government systems now. And we'll provide some definition of the term automation and what it means by way of use of real-world examples in these government property systems, and the use of being able to transmit and share data in an exchange approach, as well as the use of auto ID technology. So the next slide, Dave. So let's recap for just a moment financial improvement and audit readiness. This directorate's been around for more than 10 years now. It got started back in 2011 as a notion, but it focuses on the financial management by improving the internal controls, resolving material weaknesses, and advancing the department's fiscal stewardship, right? Make sure that the books look good and make sure the transactions are matching the equipment, the procurement, everything that goes out and deploys into the field. Audit readiness for the DoD in particular is over property, plant, equipment, operating materials, and supplies. But it does put the highest priority on accounting controls and accountability for all mission critical asset information. And so that involves you. So next one. So really what, we couple more recent updates than 13 years ago now. We go back just to 2022, a couple years back, and we see that the Undersecretary of Defense, the Comptroller, Mike McCord, has been tracking the results of this directorate, and his comments here. They recognize that it's a journey, and you could see verbatim, he says, "I'd prefer to see more progress, of course, but we're peeling off the layers." So this is something that they continue to be dedicated to. They put a report out every year. Dave, if you go to the next slide. I won't be talking about that report. I'll be talking about the GAO report. The GAO weighed in about a year ago, and they published this special report to congressional committees, as the GAO does from time to time. But this report highlights the need for better accountability of government property in possession of contractors. That's you. Accountability for GFP has been a challenge for decades, so there's really nothing new or surprising there, but they are shining the spotlight on it. And the January report from a year ago, January, highlights that. So really what that means for you as contractors is you should be paying attention to all this and position yourself for favorable maintenance of your own contract compliance, right? And we know that that's your job. But back to that annual report, Dave, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the results of the FY23 identified 28 material weaknesses in the financial statement reporting. That's where they put the majority of their energy. One of the 28 was what we're all talking about here, government property in possession of contractors. That is a weakness. And, you know, the next statement is the components cannot identify in their property and financial systems the government property that is in possession of contractors. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that it's a pretty broad swath that this whole FIRE initiative covers for improvement and audit readiness of information that's essential to the effective management of mission critical assets. Obviously, you have to be good custodians and stewards of this equipment in the inventory, but it's the reporting of the data, the information that also is critical. You could see from military equipment to inventory to operating material and supplies and general equipment, all of those categories fall under this initiative. And in particular, we go to financial management information, asset information. They're looking for items such as, you know, data elements that relate to your record keeping, such as unique item identifiers, the category and type, the location and the status, description, custody, controlling financial and reporting entities. So, you know, your systems feed their systems, and then we've got pi in the middle of it all, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. But their systems they refer to as accountable property systems of record. They have to make sure, if they're the Navy or the Army or whatever program, that they verify this asset existence of book to floor and that they are complete from floor to book. That book to floor and floor to book should be something that resonates with you, and we'll be coming back to throughout this session as well. But it's a vast undertaking, and you could see things that are impacted. Now, add other building blocks in the next slide to this whole ability to identify assets uniquely on a global scale. And we find ourselves talking about item unique identification, because what was happening is serialized items, one of them couldn't be separated from another if they had the same serial number, and that became a problem. So they created this global standard so that everyone has their own ability to mark with a global IUID that comes in the form of a barcode. You, I'm sure, are seeing it on equipment that you handle. You may be generating IUIDs for your own purposes under your own contract obligation. But the whole idea here is that it becomes that key field, that key index field, as we call it in the software world, that links that one number to all of the rest of the item pedigree about that particular equipment. And oftentimes it gets put on at the point of manufacture. So if you have a manufacturing part of your business, they probably know IUID quite well, especially if it's got the mill standard 130 clause built in. So that's for newly acquired items. It also, IUIDs can be placed on for inside legacy environments where there's existing equipment. So you might inherit some legacy equipment with IUIDs. And then also within your own world of applying IUIDs to your GFP and the record keeping. In some cases, you might be required to put an IUID physically on the asset, or maybe just the reporting of the data itself. You know, it will depend based on your scenario. But it is an industry best practice. This is not a novel code. It's been out there in the public domain for a long time. Getting it encoded correctly is critically important, so you make sure you do your homework there. But it's been used across many different industries to track equipment, not just within the DoD or the government ranks. It does contain unique items. You can embed items within items and have that, you know, more sophisticated, complex hierarchy of relationships that may be part of what you need to do in your contracts as well. But the whole idea here is that you've got a common standard that everybody can adopt following that MIL Standard 130 guideline. So back to some of the other documents that drive this. we go to the next slide and talk about the DCMA guidebook, right? The guidebook is a guidebook for DCMA, by the way. It's not something that as a contractor you need to keep under your pillow at night, but do recognize that it's the guidebook DCMA will use for you to make sure that you are doing all the right things as a contractor. It's about 120 pages, easy reading, I'm sure, but no, it is worth flipping through because it's the guidance to evaluate a contractor's ability to meet the property management system requirements within your contract obligations. So the PMSA, just to recap, is a systemic objective review and evaluation of a contractor's property management system. So it's there to determine whether it's providing effective and efficient control of government property in compliance with applicable government property clauses, contract provisions, and any voluntary consensus standards or industry-leading practices. So with all that being said, excuse me, that is a PMSA is a should be able to provide some guardrails to what you need to do and how you need to do it, and it's a referenceable document that way. If you go now to the next slide, so this is something that I talk about a lot: what a modern government property management system looks like, and by the way, what it doesn't look like. And that's an easy one. It doesn't look like spreadsheets. I'll get into the reasons why. But what it does look like is it starts with centralized. And Dave, if you click forward in the at the 12 o'clock position, on a common system of record keeping, it needs to be accessible to all the locations that are responsible for the accounting of government furnished property and CAP and anything else that qualifies. So to have a system that within your own, within your own enterprise, that can allow the ability for people, even in the most remote areas, to be able to update the record keeping for the reasons of accuracy and completeness, it's important. It also needs to be secure, right? And that data storage and the cybersecurity standards that are now being emphasized as a requirement, and it has to pass through all of this controlled unclassified information, set of tests with CMMC to ensure that the accountable record keeping is being held securely and maintained securely. I don't believe there'll probably be a lot of IT departments that are on a call like this, but I'm sure that they're beating the drum within your organization that any of this data that qualifies needs to be managed and controlled to these new cybersecurity standards. This is a big year, by the way, coming into that set of obligations. And what will be happening in that, it's a whole different session unto itself, the cybersecurity discussion. But what will start to happen is you'll start seeing more and more consistent reference to being CMMC compliant as an organization. And of course, this is data sets that fall under that CMMC compliance. On top of it, we talk about accessibility as a modern system. That means that there are many different devices, like what I'm holding in my hand, that you can use to capture data. It can be smartphones, it could be laptops, it could be desktops, it could be tablets or other kinds of industrial mobile computers. But think about the way in which makes sense for your operation on collecting data and being able to collect it while you're in front of the physical item. And so that doesn't always speak well to laptops, and of course not desktops at all. So you've got to think about where you need to be performing that update at the point of the transaction and where you can capture the most accurate information. It needs to be automated too, and I'll come back to that automation in a moment, but lastly, it needs to be integrated. And so the ability to exchange data with other systems That could be government systems, or it could be your own internal ERP systems. But to be able to eliminate the swivel chair in the silos of data will ultimately save a significant amount of time from having to re-enter data or resolve data entry mistakes. And I'll give you a quick side note on this one. You know, it probably may not surprise you that we were working with a particular military component that had 3 different inventory databases that were tracking the exact same items. None of them were in sync. They were wildly different record sets and data. And so not a single database had the right information in it. And that's what happens when you work down the path of silos, is that everything gets out of sync and information becomes unmanageable at some point. Now, what do I mean by automated? So today's government systems do leverage automation. And what I'm here to say is that when it comes to automation, it can mean auto ID technology, as pointed out here. So auto ID means barcode, it means RFID, it means other machine readable codes that might have a code encoding on your asset or on your inventory. So barcode automation has been around for many decades, and uses are successfully proven here in our industry. What I see often happening is that customers are putting on barcodes on the physical assets, but, and the thing that's a bit frustrating to see at times, is they're not leveraging that barcode. They're not scanning it at key points of the transaction that allow them to be most efficient and accurate in the updates of what's happening. So for instance, you could scan an item to assign to a custodian. You could scan items to assign to a location. You can scan items to perform a physical inventory. All very straightforward transactions by leveraging a barcode in that capacity. I'm also referring to RFID in this case. So anyone who hasn't had experience with RFID is similar to barcode, although barcode is a one-to-one relationship, while RFID is a scanner one-to-many relationship. So imagine that you could just see assets or inventory moving around your facility from one room to another or in different parts of the warehouse. That's what RFID provides. And we'll get a little bit more into some definition on that. Just note that it is a very real and applicable technology today. And we see a number of organizations who are already adopting and benefiting from it very well. And it is far more affordable than you think. And I say that because RFID has actually been around for about 20 years, but its effectiveness and the affordability had always had a fairly high bar to entry. But in the past 5 years, that's actually changed fairly dramatically. And so think about that as you're thinking about automation as well. Data exchange is another form of automation. And we'll get into some of the data exchange options for you here as we get into it. The other thing I'm going to mention too is the importance of mobility. And mobile devices can be as simple as things that we walk around in our pockets every day, which is the ability to leverage a tablet or a smartphone or something that might actually even have more sophisticated barcode scanning or auto ID technology built into it. Again, I'll emphasize the importance there of capturing the transaction at the point of activity. So you don't have to go in the field and perform all your logs and then move back and update to a desktop all that record keeping. So to be able to go paperless, if you will, in that capacity and be able to perform those updates in the field. Let me comment on spreadsheets for just a moment before we move on. So why is a government property management system not suitable by using a spreadsheet today? And by the way, this is my perspective on it. There might be some people that do leverage a spreadsheet who at the moment can pass an audit. I don't believe that that's a long-term solution. One is because spreadsheets are not transactional. And in order to be able to perform, in my opinion, an audit-ready posture with your system, you have to be able to capture not only the records and know that they're accurate, but to have the auditable transactions of who did what and what did they change records from to, etc. That's a transactional database. And in software words, we call it a relational database. So a relational database allows you to have a much more robust record-keeping history of what happened. Spreadsheets also cannot handle the use of auto ID technology. So to leverage barcode is very, very difficult. To leverage RFID with a spreadsheet is impossible. It just can't be done. Spreadsheets are not often multi-user, and therefore also there's security concerns about the use of spreadsheets as well, especially in the cybersecurity world today. You know, we run into a lot of things like two-factor authentication now being a requirement of the cybersecurity world, right? Spreadsheets cannot handle that. Spreadsheets are also error prone. Let's face it, you can go in and easily set up a cell that can be a conditional cell, or it can be a formatted cell that could totally change the meaning of the number you have represented inside that cell. Imagine going from a currency cell to a telephone cell, you know, and next thing you know, you've got a totally different number represented there. The last thing is spreadsheets also do not handle well the automated reporting through to other systems. And by that, I mean, you know, in an automated form where data is on a regular basis uploading through to a system without any human involvement. So here's the thing. In the end, it's managing risks for you and your company. The risks to the organization are getting high. You know, contracts are on the line, corrective actions are on the line. You've got to be looking at a system that can elevate your game and allow you to be more efficient. So let's get back to the automation part of this story. And this is where we get into the opportunities to automate property management tasks. Receiving is a good area of automation. We'll talk about attachments. We'll talk about the way data can flow from a receiving action into procurement. Identification, it can happen. The performing of inventory counts, as you might imagine. One of the illustrated examples across many industries today is performing efficient inventory counts from the grocery stores to the retail stores we go in. Contract transfers that can take place, DD 1149s or the paperwork required to support these transactions, as well as reporting through to the PI system, or in this case, the GFP module we'll talk about. So let's get into it. So we're going to begin with the most simple form of automation, and that is by taking data provided by the government and accepting it into our government property management system, starting with that attachment. So the attachment, of course, for everyone here tuning in, is of course the information provided to us by the government typically that represents what is expected upon receipt by taking on this contract obligation. The key here is to make sure that what the attachment says that you should receive or take custody of is in fact correct, right? You got to make sure there's no discrepancies between the actual record keeping and what you physically bring in. That's very key. But now once that's verified, it is, time and a good opportunity to import this data. So by importing an attachment into your government property system, you will have saved hours of data entry and mistakes. But keep in mind that you may have to make some formatting adjustments to the attachment to ensure that you import it smoothly without issue. This can handle, as you know, the attachment handles both serialized and non-serialized inventory. That all can be imported. The key here is to take your time on the upfront with this template and set up an import map. So that allows you to link the columns together from the attachment through to the fields in the database that you need to upload to. But know that you only need to set this map up one time, right? And each time you go to import future attachments, that map will always be there. You select the map, it matches columns to columns, and you're able to hit import, and the huge time savings that ensues. It may be that you have to save the attachment to a CSV file first before you upload, but you know, essentially in the end, it's going to let you take that spreadsheet and ingest it. And now it's formatted and ready for your reporting back to the GFP module to say that you've receipted in this particular shipment coming to you. Now, the next one is similar in the way that it can exchange data, but in a more automated way without any clicks involved. So here's another approach to getting government property into your government property management system. In my opinion, it's also one of the most overlooked approaches to eliminate siloed data and to provide an integrated approach so you can have your databases in sync and you're looking at a single pot of truth, as we call it. And so it will save time, it will eliminate siloed data, and it will present that one picture in sync between the two systems. So oftentimes we see here that it starts with procurement or ordering equipment that of course needs to be accounted for. In this example, we'll use CostPoint. You can see the CostPoint screen here. CostPoint allows for the procurements that are taking place, the PO, the recs and POs that are issued, to drive the receiving process. Once the items are received into CostPoint, the asset data that you need to account for can exchange directly with your government property system. So not only does the item name and description flow, but so does serial number, part number, and other asset pedigree, right? And so when you now go into your government property management system and you want to perform something like an inventory count or a location change, you know, these things are taking place, our quantities are updated, they can logically flow back to your ERP system, and in this case, back to CostPoint. So you now have your two record-keeping systems in sync. Now, if you are in fact using CostPoint today, as an example, you might be thinking, well, where do I integrate? CostPoint's, you know, it's a very robust system. What module do I integrate to take best advantage of that? And there are, you know, there's a couple of options to consider. The answer is it depends. If you are managing everything through your fixed assets module or some, you know, amount of data through your fixed assets, maybe it's your fixed assets module you want to go into. It could be that you're managing some of this through to your manufacturing and production area. It could be that you use it and integrate to your inventory module inside CostPoint. So just a couple of you know, areas where you may want to consider that data exchange to flow. So anyway, in the end, this allows everybody to see the same data to complete the sync between two systems without any manual involvement. You just set the cadence in which you want the data to flow. That cadence could be, you know, every hour. It could be once a day. It could be every 5 minutes, right? So know that when that is set, now the data exchange is happening, the two systems are updating each other, and you're good to go. So that's something to think about as far as, you know, what you can do to really keep the data in sync and eliminate that sideload data. The next area we'll talk about here is the area of identification. So identification is a contract obligation, as we all know. But I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine that you're back. I'm going to go way back machine here. back to the 1970s. And you're a grocery store telling your suppliers that you need a barcode on everything that comes in. At first, it simply looks like more work. But when you start to leverage technologies that can scan barcodes or even RFID tags, you gain a huge advantage in the future or downstream in your workflow, which we'll give an example of. Today's technology here for auto ID is off the shelf, ready to deploy. So you can print barcodes on demand. You can actually print and encode RFID tags on demand, very much similar to the printers that you see on the screen here. You can also pre-order any of these tags formatted to your exact specifications with a human readable barcode, property of US government, whatever it needs to be on there, and have them shipped to your door. So we see the use of both printing on site with those that want to have a printer local that they can control, and off-site printing used with just about the same frequency, honestly. So once you have the tag is applied to the item, now you need to associate that tag to the item pedigree. And you've accomplished the identification requirement. But you've also enabled a much more efficient downstream data capture process now that you have the inventory tagged with a unique asset ID, whichever form you want to choose. Why is that important? So when you do your inventories, when you're tracking the movement, when you're performing lifecycle updates or maintenance activities, all of these use cases will add up to, with the use of these auto IT technologies, will add up to time savings and improved accuracy. So let me give an example of this. If we go to the next slide, we're going to see that we want to focus on a barcode inventory for just a moment. In this first screen, you'll see that your assets are all listed, right? The record will typically start with an asset ID, like on the far left side. We call it the item ID in this particular example. But when you turn on your mobile device that has an integrated barcode scanner to it, and you log in, you can walk into an area inside your facility, simply select that location on the mobile, and all of the assets that are expected to be there will appear on the screen. No uploading files, they just appear since the system can take advantage of that data in real time and show what should be in that location. Then you start scanning. With barcode, it's the one-to-one. Scan barcode, check, 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 right on down the list. And the mobile will start reconciling these items that are in that location directly in front of you. You have a real-time dashboard showing you what's being reconciled based on that location. No need to log on a paper, no need to walk back to a desktop workstation. So you'll know what you've captured instantly. You'll know what you've missed instantly, and all that will be updating the records in real time. So if anyone's looking at the database from a desktop computer somewhere, can see it happening in real time. But here's also another benefit, especially if you have robust facilities or remote sites that you go to. When you see things that have been missed or that you can't find, you can act upon that information now that you have that real-time dashboard in front of you. So what also happens when you scan a barcode is the date, time, and location stamps are all captured at that moment in time and updated to ensure that all your data is in sync now, back to your main database, back to that, remember that pod of truth. Again, what you're looking for here is that the books match the floor and that the floor matches the books. Book to floor, floor to book accountability. If you go to the next slide, we'll see that that kind of historical activity is now captured down the left-hand side. You can see things were moved, things were inventoried, when the record was created, by whom, and when those things were created, and any further details about that transaction history. And now you have a full auditable system that lets you now have that historical background and context. Again, actionable item. If we go to RFID inventories, you're going to see something similar to barcode, but different. And let me explain what's happening here. So this is where I like to introduce the analogy. Let's imagine for a moment, close our eyes, that we're sitting in a boat out on the water, and you've got a fishing pole over the side that you just cast. With that approach, you pull in one fish at a time. Usually we have one hook per cast. That's barcode scanning, that one-to-one relationship. Now imagine you're in the same boat, but you have a big net that you cast over the side. With that approach, you may pull in 10, 20 fish at a time. That's RFID. It's the one-to-many relationships with one cast. And so there's great news that it's not a significant investment difference between the pole versus the net. So what I'm saying here is when RFID scanning takes place, when you tag the items with an RFID tag, you can capture all the items within a 10 to 20 foot range. It's using RF signal. It can read around corners and into areas that are even difficult to get to, because we hear a lot of complaints of people saying, you know, in equipment or fixed assets or lab equipment might have a barcode tag in an innocuous place that's hard to reach, where RFID tagging can really use the RF signal in which to capture that information without having to see line of sight what it is. You can see the item, but the tag might be in a tough place to reach. And so that's what RFID technology can do. All the same reconciling is happening right before your very eyes. That dashboard will show you the location you're in and what you should be reconciling, and then giving you the check boxes to show that you've got everything, or you don't, and that you need to deal with it or do something about it. One thing I'll mention too is this is an opportunity to address anything that you find that you didn't know was there, right? Because with RFID, and you're not dealing with one-to-one relationships anymore, you might pick up 2 or 3 items that you had no idea was in that location. Let's say it was a laboratory and some engineers brought in some equipment that had moved from a whole different building. Now you can see them and you know that they weren't logged at that location because you're using RF signal and you're not looking for that one-to-one. You're actually looking for the one-to-many. So there's a big benefit there as well. One thing I'll mention too about RFID is that when you've put those tags on, those tags act like mini sensors. And if you go to the next slide here, what you'll see is that there are sensors that can be placed in a way around your facility that act as autonomous readers of those items. Now remember, there's no battery source for these tags. These are tags that are called passive RFID tags, and they only wake up when they're spoken to by a sensor. So when they pass a sensor, for instance. Dave, if you click forward, there's an example of a sensor, a couple sensors. One that might mount overhead in the top left corner, the bottom left corner, ones that might be gateways or what we call the goalposts that sit on either side of a dock door to see everything that comes and goes. But on the right-hand side, you'll see these orange two-way arrows, and what that designates is the fact that in this kind of warehouse, office area, production room area, you can put sensors in key egresses or choke points so that as items come and go, you can absolutely get the updated information of what's passing by that point, the date and time it's doing it, and the location or direction in which it's moving. So when it goes into the warehouse, you don't need to light up the whole warehouse with RFID. You just need to know that it entered, and then maybe use a mobile computer to hone in on more closely where it ends up in that warehouse. So that'll give you a sense of the downstream benefits of this autonomous tracking of equipment and the ability to really leverage accountability. We've even heard organizations saying, look, you know, my one-time inventory accountability takes place when it passes one of these sensors. Hey, I know if it passed the sensor, I can say I've got it in my inventory and I don't have to go back out and count it. So when I go back out to find the items that I haven't seen in a year, the population is much, much smaller. So now let's get beyond auto ID for a moment and digress back to systems. So the DoD, as we know, surfaced this, gigantic e-commerce platform, let's call it, and that is Pi, is what it is. Within Pi, there are a number of other different applications that I know you're familiar with. If you're doing invoice, receipt, and acceptance of new procurements, you're very familiar with wide area workflow or WAF. If you're dealing in the world we deal with, you know GFP module inside and out. GFP module deals with the attachments, the shipments, the receipts, the updates, and the disposals or the dispositions. The IUID registry now is actually become part of the GFP module. So I have it separated out here, but essentially GFP module and IUID registry, I believe, is considered to be sort of a one platform at this point. So why is this important? If we go to the next slide, we can see from within your government. Oh, let me make one more comment, Dave, if you don't mind flipping back to that for a moment. I noticed that fly in. The one thing to keep in mind with these systems, these government systems are not designed for you to have to always be manually key entry of information into that platform, right? You have system data that they need, and they are designed with a direct data exchange to be more efficient, to be more effective. So we're going to talk about here in just a moment, how do you leverage that so that you don't have to do all this extra data entry into Pi or the GFP module. So that takes us to the next slide. So in the next slide here, we want to report to the GFP module. We want to report in bulk to the GFP module, not a one-to-one, but I want to select a group. In this case, I'm going to use this representative example of a 4-speed, Jeep transmission, right? What's happening here is that when I select these items in order to provide the update to the GFP module, I can see that the data is automatically being validated against the GFP module data standard. So we know that if we hit submit, it's only conforming data that will be accepted into the system. So it compares it both for accuracy and for completeness of the data, again, before we hit submit and it sends to that system, because we don't want to send the data and then have it kick back and then we have to resolve all of this data. It allows you to have the trust that you're sending the data right the first time and avoid those extra downstream corrections. If the data is unresolved, you'll know it here on the screen, and then you'll be able to do something about it if you click forward, Dave. Right. So there's a couple different dashboards that tell you, you know what, you don't have all your data complete. Make sure it's complete before it goes, before you submit it through to the GFP module. So that's a nice built-in capability. You go to the next slide, we're going to talk about additional detail that comes from reporting. So when you get it right, the nice thing too is that you can receive confirmation inside your dashboard that the government system saying, yep, got your data, good to go. Inside your registration dashboard, you can see it's been logged. It now becomes part of your audit trail, right? That you can then show DCMA should they ask. And you can also have emails automatically triggered to you as an individual or to a group within your organization that'll tell you either, yes, you got it right, or if there was anything that needed to be resolved, that you can resolve it. And so you don't end up with silent failure, right? You submit something and then you never hear back and you're not really sure. You always get some form of confirmation. Another area for automation that can help is contracts bulk transfers, right? When property moves in bulk, so can the data. And so when you can associate a whole data set to a new contract value, you can do that function in bulk. And that is a massive time saver as well, and something that we see organizations challenged with without really thinking through carefully, how do we get that done and do it most efficiently. So again, moving property from one contract to the next. The next one I want to talk about is, as long as there is government work, there will always be paperwork, right? And the ability to create or automate these 1149s. So when you have the data already existing in the system, why should you go over and type it into a form or write it into a form? You just want to one-click generate the paperwork in association with that. So, if you've got a shipment and you're generating your DD 1149, you'll see that information appear, and you can add any of the detail line item information. In other words, it'll automatically populate, and it could even go down to the UID level if that's what you prefer, and will satisfy, again, that contract visibility, that contract information, or not. It depends on how you want this form to be set up. So with all that being said, I'm gonna say, let's do one more recap on why automate, right? So why automate is because of data entry. Data entry, we've become a profession of heavy on the data entry side. And so when we can exchange data coming from and going to these other systems, whether it's a government system, as we noted, or your own internal system, such as an ERP system, you are going to benefit from that automation. The next one is leveraging auto ID technology. Couple good examples of why barcode is relevant still today, and why RFID is gaining in adoption to set up that future time savings and that accuracy that you seek. We can automate the paperwork, right? Such as the DD forms, DD 250s, DD 1149s, whatever is being required for you to generate. The next one's electronic reporting to government, exchanging that data directly through to government systems. That e-commerce platform will continue to grow. We all know this, right? It's a system that is really becoming well honed in what its purpose is. And they're trying to do their best to not add too much onerous data entry overhead, but it's going to come with the need for more and more data as this grows. And then lastly, the biggest overarching is achieve data accuracy, reduce those errors, and ultimately save yourself a significant amount of time, while we're all being required to do, more with less people, less, time on our own hands. So with that being said, Dave, I'm going to say let's take some questions if there are any.
Peter, this is Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
I do have a couple of questions. One is, what is your recommendation on implementing RFID into an ABN/IBN barcode contract?
An ABN or an IBN, you said contract?
Barcode contract.
Barcode contract. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that phrase. If there's any other more general detail than that one reference, I could try to comment, but I don't know what that barcode contract is.
Okay. Jessica, if you want to clarify that or give us more info, I'll relate that to Peter. There's another question for you real quick. Why wouldn't RFID and IUID be a duplication of efforts?
Yeah. So let me see if I can put it this way. So if we're talking about the use of those two technologies for asset identification, then they are not duplicate efforts. Let me explain why. IUID is required for compliance purposes, fundamentally, especially if you're a government contractor. and if you have Mill Standard 130 called out as part of your contract obligation. So you must do IUID because you need to generate the barcode and you need to generate the IUID, or what they call the UII data key, that then can get reported with your government property record keeping. However, on RFID, how that's different is because RFID, I haven't seen too many instances where RFID is a requirement. It's not a must, but oftentimes it can be an incredibly helpful tool for tracking, because you're going to put a barcode on it anyway for identification purposes. You could put RFID on it for tracking inventory more efficiently, or seeing tools move back and forth, or something moving through a production workflow environment. That's where the tool can enable much more efficiency if your obligation is to identify these items that you receive in, and it can be with a much faster and much less effort than barcode.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
And here's a follow-up to that question. She is just trying to figure out the best way to implement this into an existing contract, and they are currently using barcodes.
Yeah, so I would say that, there's barcode. The way I would phrase the need for using RFID is that you need to look at, always start with what I refer to as the problem you're trying to solve. So if RFID is going to do something that lets you, track more efficiently inside your business process, and I use that term loosely because it could be a maintenance environment, it could be, a warehouse full of inventory, those kind of things. It's going to start when you accept the responsibility over those items and being able to generate an RFID tag at the point where today you generate a barcode tag. Now, as you start to cycle in RFID tagged items on top of where you've already probably put barcode tagged items, you can do that, but it's a longer conversation that I'd be happy to dive into at a different time. But what will have to happen is that you will need to set your database up so you can not only track the barcoded item, but an RFID tagged item as well. And there's a way to do that and do it very simply so that, your record keeping stays aligned. And then you start to think about, well, how do I start to really leverage it? Where do I put in some mobile computers that will help me do all my counts much more effectively? Or where can I put some of these RFID sensors in my building or in my workflow process to really help capture these items as they move through? But it all still links back to those items that you've that you're responsible for and that you're trying to report. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Peter. And then one more. She said, thank you. Can RFID and or barcode be used in secure spaces like SCIFs?
So this is kind of a nuanced answer too. So inside a SCIF, the parameters of a SCIF are oftentimes that you can have, you can't introduce devices that have certain technical capabilities. So you can't have them emit, wireless, right? You can't have them, capture audio. You can't have them capture video. Those kind of things in SCIFs as the level set. What's good about barcode and about RFID is that neither of those tags are emitting of anything. So you can put them on any equipment going inside a SCIF, no issue there. Even RFID, because some people may say, hey, Pete, with RFID, doesn't it have something emitting? The answer is no, it won't wake up unless it's near a reader that wakes it up, right? And so since you often won't have those readers inside a facility like that, you don't need to worry about it. However, what you can do is there are some allowable barcode scanner devices that don't emit that let you go in and scan your barcode tags. So you can use a mobile device to walk in. You can also mount outside a skiff an RFID sensor so you know what's in there, and should it leave that location, that facility, it'll automatically be captured and detected outside the skiff. So those are a couple of recommendations on what to do there.
Okay, and we had a couple of comments where people were noting that some customers say no Bluetooth, you know, it has to be approved by the customer, and it kind of depends on those requirements. We are at the 2 o'clock mark. There is one more, I think, question. That skiff thing got people going. um, let me see if I can find this question. I think just from my understanding, there's a different type of RFID that may be a contractual requirement for shipping out packages as CLIN deliverables or CLIN deliverables. The contractual RFID requirements and this presentation for RFID tracking are different references to the RFID. Does that?
Yeah, I know exactly what whoever made that comment is talking about. So that's why I said when I was referring to RFID tracking, I'm talking asset identification here. You also may have a MIL standard 129 shipping a labeling requirement, right? So that inside that MIL standard 129 MSL, military shipping label, you may have an RFID tag requirement called out there as well. And that's a different encoding thing altogether. But that's for the shipment level, which might be unit level, container level, or pallet level. It's a whole different discussion.
Perfect. Thank you. And then people are passing on their thanks and congratulations on your 20th anniversary with NPMA. I don't know, Scott, if you're there, I don't know if you wanted to close it out, but otherwise, I think we're good to go. Just a couple of things for folks who are wondering. It'll probably be early mid-April before the CEUs are uploaded. And we appreciate your patience for that. It's a bit of a manual process. But we will get that done. These presentations will be uploaded to the YouTube channel, the NPMA YouTube channel. You will also be able to find links on the AMAM page at npma.org. So I think that's everything. Thank you again. Thank you, Peter. Thanks, Dave, in the background. Appreciate you guys. Everybody have a good rest of the day. Thanks.
You too. Take care.
Thanks.